On today's episode of the Meat Medic podcast, I am interviewing Troy, who's a 51-year-old gentleman newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes after he went to the doctor when his wife told him that he needed a checkup. Now, he was given a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, and Troy has corroborated this number of times. His HbA1c was 16.1, which I have never even heard of anybody having that high. I've got a patient recently that HbA1c was 13.7. I thought that was the highest I'd ever seen. Now, Troy basically went carnivore to fix this after he found there was just so much terrifyingly bad health information out there. And we have a really good chat in this episode about early days of carnivore, early days of treating type 2 diabetes, and just, the general terrible health advice that's out there. On with the podcast. Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Meat Medic podcast. Now, today I have Troy with me. So, Troy, thank you for coming on the show.
Hi, Suresh. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for coming on. And you've got a pretty incredible story to share, actually. So I don't want to steal any of your thunder, Troy. I'm going to let you take it away and give us the background, give us the story. Long version is absolutely fine.
Sure. So I'm 51, about to turn 52, but I'm clinging to 51 as long as I possibly can. And I've had a pretty atrocious diet, as a lot of guys my age probably have. So I was starting to get some diabetes type symptoms, which were a bit worrying, and certainly for my wife. And it was her who sort of prompted me to go and see the doctor, which I hadn't been to a doctor in 20 years. So I went, and the results were probably worse than we thought. So I had pretty much all the markers of metabolic syndrome. My blood pressure was, I believe, 165 over 110. My A1C was 16.8. And we just spoke off air, and you said you didn't know it actually went that high.
I know. I'm trying to do a surprised face for the YouTube channel. And we spoke off air, and I asked you. I'm sorry to interrupt your story. I'll let you carry on. But I asked you, is that a typo? Genuinely, I have never seen an A1C that high.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. And
yeah, like listeners, viewers, that's a pretty shockingly high A1C. I think that should be the background of this conversation.
Yeah, 100%. And it should be under sort of 5.5. So more than 3 times what it should be. Hopefully, and what I'm hoping by being on here is that my story will sort of encourage people that even if things are looking crook for you at the moment, that it's never too late. The turnaround has been quite astounding, and what I've learned from being part of the low carb, carnivore, keto type community is that my story is not unique by any stretch of the imagination. There are so many stories of people just turning their health around in a short period of time. It's quite amazing. So to carry on, I was doing the normal diabetic thing. My vision was getting worse. I was calling into the survey to grab those $10 reading glasses every couple of weeks because my sight was getting worse and worse and worse. So I was getting a 2x magnifier, the 2.5, the 3. Chronic fatigue, muscle aches, diabetic neuropathy. I was getting pins and needles in my fingers, which was quite worrying. Retinopathy with my eyesight, obviously. So went to the doctor, and he wrote me a prescription for 3 medications, including insulin injections, and said, I need you to go to the hospital right now. So for a bit of background, I'll just rewind a little bit. About 2 years before that, I just happened to come across a documentary called Fed Up, which was about the issues of American obese children and what they're being fed in school, so on and so forth. And it introduced me to Dr. Robert Lustig and Mark Hyman, and to a lesser extent Gary Taubes, who's an investigative journalist. And I was really interested in what they had to say, and it made a lot of sense to me. But like a lot of carb addicts and sugar addicts, I had the best of intentions, and I thought I'll do that one day. I'll start looking after my health. And many attempts to come off sugar, and they'd last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I dropped 5 kilos in 10 days, and it was great. And then back on the wagon, or off the wagon, as the case may be. So with that in mind, that was enough of the shock to the system. The doctor said, you are literally about to drop off the perch. Get on these medications. I had enough of, I guess, a skeptical mind that I had my doubts about big pharma, certainly about big food, and I thought I'm going to go home and bury my head in research, see if there's a way that I can do this myself, and see if Robert Lustig and Mark Hyman and the likes are in fact right. So I went home and started doing some YouTube searching. The first video I came along by chance was from Ken Berry, and that just got me hooked. And I've just been studying and studying and studying. I went cold turkey carnivore straight away. And fast forward, so this all happened in October, so it's been about 4 months. I haven't had my next sort of blood test yet, but all of my symptoms are gone. I've been getting the finger pricks. My blood sugar is now down in range. I'm not getting up and going to the toilet 6, 7, 8 times a night like I was. I don't wear glasses anymore. It's just been quite astounding, and I've finally, because it's been 4 months now, I've kicked sugar. And I knew you talked as a fellow sugar addict. You never really kick sugar, but I don't feel like a relapse is just around the corner. So it's such an incredible turnaround that I deep down I probably didn't think was possible. But now that I've seen it with my own eyes, and I wake up feeling great every day.
Yeah, I mean, what a incredible kind of, story. And yeah, I mean, people obviously watching on YouTube can probably see me just smiling away in the background. People listening in the car on the podcast, they can't see me smiling away. Everything you were saying there about just, being a sugar addict and doing all those diets and going off the sugar. Yeah, straight away just losing, like five kilos, whatever, like, and then just not being able to actually sustain it. The sugar, the power, that sugar holds is really, really very, 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 very strong. It's very, very addictive. And we can talk about that, of course. And my recent change in my diet, I know we were talking a little bit about that off air prior to, if you want to get into that, we can. I think you're right. I mean, in a certain way, and I've said this before, that, yeah, like any other addiction, I'm not sure you're ever truly cured, but I think you can come out the other side with sugar. Maybe not so much things like alcohol, but with sugar, I think it's possible to come out the other side and say, okay, I can probably moderate at some point. At least maybe some people. I was listening to good friend Casey Ruff on Boundless Body Radio. Shout out to you, Casey. I know you listen to the show. And he was talking about this. Still, he's 4 years on in his kind of carnivore journey, and he still is just really addicted to sugar. He just can't moderate it. So maybe some people they do really struggle.
Yeah, I remember. Sorry, Karen. I was just going to say, I remember I was about a week into carnivore, and I went into the supermarket, and it occurred to me that what I pulled, just the packaging had, you see a bottle of Coke or a packet of chips or whatever the stuff that you normally eat, and you get a physiological reaction, and it's got that incredible pull. So it's such a multifaceted thing that it's the taste and the way your hormones react, and it's the way that your pleasure center activates when you see these things. So it's really a sensory overload, which is why it's so hard to kick.
Oh, it really is. I mean, it's going back to medical school. We learned about Pavlov's dogs, say that correctly, in this Pavlovian response. This is operant conditioning, I think, is the terminology. And yeah, it's just this kind of real visceral response. You see that sugar, you see that packaging, you start to salivate, your insulin goes up. And this is well proven. There is a physiological response to this stimuli. Your insulin goes up because it's anticipating that you're going to eat sugar, because it knows that's what you've done for decades. Your insulin goes up, your blood sugar falls. And then, so what do you need to do? You need to go and replace your blood sugar. So then you go and eat the sugar. And then it just maintains this whole cycle. I do want to just backtrack though. I mean, I think I said at the start, I interrupted you very rudely, but I do want to kind of underpin this. This is really underpinning this whole conversation, that HbA1c of 16.1 is
16.8.
16.8. Sorry. Okay. 16.8. Wow. Yeah. Even higher. That is terribly high. Genuinely, as a doctor, I have not seen that high, I think, ever. As an HbA1c. Fasting glucose, yes. Not an HbA1c. It's a shame we don't have those repeat numbers, but maybe we can get you back on the show in a few months and see what's happened. But the fact that your symptoms have dramatically improved is incredible. What was your fasting kind of glucose at the start? What kind of readings were you getting there? Because HbA1c was 16.8, but what was your kind of fasting glucose?
It was pretty close, and I should have been organised and had my results with me, but I think it was well up into the teens as well, from memory.
Right, really? Not higher?
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to say 14.
Okay, that's not that high actually, considering, 16.8. So interesting.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, perhaps I behaved myself for a couple of days knowing I was going to the doctor.
Maybe it did improve. So you mentioned all those symptoms, of course, all, diabetic symptoms, peripheral neuropathy, retinopathy, eye problems, nerve problems, weeing overnight. You said, I think 8-9 times you were getting up overnight.
Every hour and a half.
Yeah. And then you went onto YouTube. So you went to the doctor, and the doctor said, right, okay, you need 3 medications, including insulin, which we can talk about. In my opinion, one of potentially may not be the worst thing that you can do. That's probably not the way of saying it, but the last resort, I think, for me.
I agree.
And we can talk about why. And then you decided, no, that's not the route I want to go down.
Yeah, so it was so incredibly fortunate to have seen this movie and just started digging into the science behind it. And I found Robert Lustig especially, I found extremely trustworthy, and things he said made a lot of sense. And Dr. Mark Hyman talked about the message that we're fed is that we just simply need to eat less and exercise more, and that will solve all our problems. And it's just not true, because if that was the case, we wouldn't have the obesity problems that we had, because since the low-fat revolution of the late 70s, early 80s, gym memberships and the fitness industry has gone through the roof, but at the same time, so has obesity and diabetes and so forth. So the treadmill isn't the way to get out of this. The fry pan is.
Absolutely. It really is. And I'm just putting final touches on my insulin resistance book. And that's pretty much the whole story, is calories in, calories out. It doesn't work for weight loss. It doesn't work for health. It doesn't really work for anything. Insulin resistance really does pin, the vast majority of this. And probably a lot of people listen to people like Ben Bikman. I don't know if you're aware of Ben Bikman. I mean, he's an expert, of course, in insulin resistance. And he, covers this in his book, and things like type 2 diabetes. I mean, there's only one way really to treat it, and that is to reduce the insulin resistance. And calories really don't do anything. In fact, they actually can increase.
Yes, yeah, 100%. So an interesting little side note, I went through a stage probably a couple of weeks ago where I don't know if it's cravings or if I was just sick of water, and I started reintroducing Coke Zero, Pepsi Max, whatever the case may be. And I did all my research and found lots of guys on YouTube who they'd have a CGM and they'd drink a Diet Coke and say, look, it didn't do anything to my blood sugar. And I thought, well, that's encouraging. The stories about them being a carcinogen and, aspartame and whatnot, that's probably a separate issue. It may or may not be. But I then looked at, just in the last couple of days, a receptor called the TAS1R2, which basically has an insulin release, whether it's sugar or whether it's any sweet substance. So as you were saying, regardless of whether it affects your blood sugar, it affects your insulin. And for type 2 diabetics like myself, that's a bigger problem than I think your general blood sugar.
It is. And this is where things like CGMs, they're very useful. And I'm all for data. And to that point, we're going to have Marty Kendall on the show fairly soon, who is pretty much an expert in, data-driven diabetes care. That's going to be a really good show. But yeah, glucose is not the be all and end all. I mean, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, separating diabetes mellitus from diabetes insipidus, 2 different things. Type 1, of course, type 2, slightly different as well. But really fundamentally, these are not diseases of glucose or sugar. These are diseases of insulin. And that's where we should actually be focusing our efforts. Yeah, we focus all the time on just the glucose.
100%. Insulin is the golden goose of this whole puzzle. If we solve that, then so many of these things either go away or reduce dramatically. That after that, it's just a case of tweaking around the edges. If we can nail the insulin resistance, we're halfway there.
Probably more than half. I mean, probably more like 75, 80%, if not more, to be perfectly honest. I really do think, I agree with Ben Bikman, his book, Why We Get Sick. is fantastic, and it really does underpin a lot of chronic health disease. So let's just backtrack a little bit. So you went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Here's all these two tablets plus insulin,"
Yep.
and then you said no.
I did.
But he actually sent you to the hospital first. What did the hospital say?
I didn't go. Uh, I sat in my car for about 20 minutes, and I, I felt some resolve, and I felt in my gut that I knew the right thing to do. So actually, instead of going to the doctor, I drove straight to KFC and had a ceremonial last Zinger burger.
Probably not the best. The best.
Probably not, but no, don't follow that advice, everyone. But that was just a little bit of a last act of defiance. But then went home, got serious, and straight onto the carnivore train after that, and went through the keto flu. But fortunately, joined an Australian carnivore Facebook group that I got lots of great information and was told that what I was going through was very normal. In retrospect, I probably should have just tapered down, but emotions were sort of running high, and I wanted to act now and fix the problem. But looking back, it was just the best thing I ever did.
Yeah, I mean, that momentum is very powerful. I think once you've got that, then to a certain point, yes, you kind of just need to ride with it. And yes, disclaimer, getting a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes and then going to KFC is probably not the best idea. I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
I mean, KFC is nice. It's tasty at least, but yeah, not the best food for us. So you went home, you researched, YouTube, you decided on carnivore. What made you pick carnivore over, say, like low carb, keto? You mentioned Dr. Berry, and I presume his proper human diet. What made you kind of specifically pick carnivore?
So the one that I happened to watch was he was talking about strictly carnivore, and he talked about an elimination diet and the advantages of it. I then went on to, I just sort of let the playlist sort of roll, and I saw Sean O'Mara, Sean Baker, and lots of different people. And look, to be honest, growing up, I'd never been a huge fan of vegetables or salad. So my wife was just laughing in the background. So everything I ate was pretty much beige. So I thought, look, if there's a chance that this is actually good for you and I can stick to it, then let's just run with this and see how we go.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are you actually eating then at the moment? Because carnivore can encompass all sorts of different things. And there's going to be people listening to this saying, why am I interviewing you? Because I've kind of recently come out saying that maybe strict carnivore isn't necessarily the best thing in the long term. Yep. Obviously, you're not in the long term at the moment, and we can talk about that if you want to. What are you actually eating at the moment then?
So majority is red meat, Scotch fillets, but I've tried to experiment a little bit. I'm trying to become a bit of an aficionado with the carnivore pizza. I air fry pork belly, all sorts of things, just to try and give a little bit of variety. As I said, I went through a period where I was having some Diet Cokes and whatnot. So I'm off that now, and we're just trying to stick to water. But yeah, bacon, bit of cheese. I've never been huge on dairy, so a bit of shredded cheese is probably about as far as I go. And again, I'm looking further into, Dr. Berry says that liquid dairy is not great for you, and he's got some pretty valid reasons why not. So I figure if I'm not missing it, then there's no harm in just leaving it out.
Yeah. And you weren't tempted to kind of go down like the Paul Saladino route, animal-based, kind of higher carb fruit?
No, I wasn't, because I guess I recognise that I'm a sugar and a carb addict, and I guess I worry that that's a slippery slope, and everyone's different. And tracking back to what you were saying, and I really want to talk about it because I listened to your last podcast where you talked about coming off strict carnivore and trying the Paul Saladino type. And I like that you've sort of used yourself as the subject, and you're looking at your blood results fairly sort of often. The one thing that I found a little bit about whatever sort of tribe you belong to, whether it's carnivore, whether it's vegan, whether it's whatever the case may be, people can tend to be a little bit dogmatic. And I think that's at their peril. I think you've got to be got to be real enough to look inwards and say, what I want is, in your words, to be optimal. That's what you want for yourself and for your patients. And I think you've got to be willing to make tweaks. But the beautiful thing about this way of eating, which I'd never known anything about because my whole life was just responding to cravings, is it's incredible how your body talks to you and tells you when something's not quite right. And listening to you've had those sorts of things. You had some pain in your thumb and some other things, and you decided to make some tweaks. And I think that's great.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And genuinely, I've actually not received that much backlash actually from that latest episode. I thought I would. I haven't. I think people.
No, nor should you.
I think people respect the humility and just the willingness to learn and say, look, maybe I was wrong. Maybe there's maybe it's not I was wrong as such. Maybe it was just okay. Some tweaks here and there actually can make things optimal. I think had I gone down that animal-based route to start with, and look, the biggest respect for Paul Saladino. I listened to his podcast. It's an amazing podcast, and I really encourage everybody to listen, it Carnivore or otherwise, because he has got a lot of very, very good stuff to say. I think he makes a lot of sense with a lot of his points, and his guests are truly world-class guests, and they have a lot of good things to say as well. I tried his animal-based diet because I was having some issues on Carnivore, but also as I'm going to debunk this. I still believed that the carbs were not the answer, based on my own personal experiences and my training in low carb medicine, keto, and so on, and of course the amazing benefits I've seen on the carnivore diet for the most part. At the time, I thought I was doing incredibly on the animal based diet. I did feel great, and I put on quite a bit of muscle with working out, but I also put on a ton of fat. Like I'd convinced myself I didn't. And I was messaging people like, oh my God, I've put on so much weight and everything. And actually, of course I just put on a ton of weight, which I'm now losing on what I'm doing now again. But I don't think that was necessarily a sugar addiction. It's hard to really tease out. I think it was perhaps it was just a rebound from carnivore. I'm really not sure, to be perfectly honest, but it didn't suit me either way. And then I realized
that's the main point.
About 3 months in. It is. What the reason is, I don't really know, but I'm not sure that really matters. It didn't particularly suit me. And it probably suits some. And I've seen some people, I'm on the Animal Based Tribe, group as well, his Facebook group, and some people are posting amazing successes on Animal Based, and that's fantastic for them.
That's great. And as Ken Berry said, if even people who are vegan, who we may not agree with because we have doubts about the nutrients and whatnot, at least they're thinking about their health. And that's a great step.
At the end of the day, if they're doing well, look, that's fantastic. That's all really anyone wants. But what was interesting about that was, yes, I did see quite a lot of benefits, but ultimately I just put on a ton of weight. Now, I think I'm just very, very carb sensitive. I've been a little bit kind of critical, maybe perhaps behind closed doors, of Ken Berry saying, in his interview with Paul Saladino a while ago, just refusing to try the animal based. I think, and this is touching on what you said there about experimentation, I think it's important that we do these things, that we don't remain dogmatic, that we don't remain narrow-minded, and we allow ourselves to try these other things. I've tried veganism. I lasted about one meal, but I've tried it, and I don't disagree with the principles of it. I think it's a bit silly to deny our basic physiology and say that we shouldn't eat meat. I think that's just crazy. Animal welfare, everything. Look, nobody disagrees with all of that side of things, climate change and so on. But getting slightly off topic there, but I was a little bit critical of him for not just outright refusing to do it. So that's why I did it, because I wanted to say, okay, I've done it. And if it worked, great. If it didn't, I can say it didn't work for me. But I think it's really important that we do experiment ourselves as doctors, as healthcare professionals, so that we understand what the patients are then going through. We understand, we can then take that back to our patients and say, hey, look, this did work for me. This didn't work for me. Look, it's not massive evidence, but you can try it. And that's a lot of how we learn.
The thing. Yeah, the thing about science, whether it's nutrition or anything else, is science isn't or shouldn't be trying to prove itself right. Science should be trying to prove itself wrong. And when it does, it should celebrate because it's learned something new. So there's certain people who sort of get on their high horse about this or that and be dogmatic. But I think people who, in the majority, we were all unhealthy and we want to be healthy. We want to keep getting better. And so if we leave ourselves open to different possibilities, a great example is Ken Berry and Robert Lustig disagree on the importance of fibre. Robert Lustig's very pro-fibre. People like Zoe Harcum and Anthony Chafee don't think it's necessary. So they're all people that I like and respect, and I'm digging right in to sort of make up my own mind, I guess. And if I need to experiment and see what works for me, then that's what I'll do.
I think that's really ultimately the most important thing. And you know, I was talking to this to someone the other day, and I was saying, you know, really as a scientist, I suppose at heart, as a doctor, you could say I'm a scientist at heart. Yeah, I think once the science is settled, then it's wrong by default.
Yes,
almost.
Yes,
it should never be settled. And of course, people like Nina Teicholz, you know, her stack with Gary Taubes, I think it is, you know, unsettled science. I mean, that really is what it should be. It should never be settled. We should never be at that point. Fiber is an interesting discussion point, but I want to come back to that. Just quickly, I do want to kind of say, well, I don't want to make it sound like Paul Saladino is saying that people with really bad diabetes should eat loads of carbs. He's repeatedly said that probably actually you shouldn't, you know, be eating that many carbs actually. So I don't want to put words in his mouth and you know, potentially misrepresent him. But I think had I gone animal-based to start with, I would have failed horribly.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting.
Yes, I've come out and said, look, I don't think carnivore is necessarily the best thing in the long term, but short term, yeah, it taught me how to deal with that sugar addiction. And I've said that repeatedly. I will, you know, repeat that all the time. It really taught me so much about nutrition, about myself, that I think animal-based it would not have taught me.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we've got to be open to that. We've got to be, rather than dig our heels in and say, oh, Suresh said that carnivore is not, you know, maybe the best thing long term, and I'm currently a carnivore. How dare he? I'm insulted, so on and so forth. Maybe we approach it from a different, vantage point and say, well, let's listen to what he has to say and let's try it. It's worked for him. You know, this way's worked for him. Does it work for me? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But any time we try it and attempt a little tweak like that, it's got to be a good thing, because either you'll get better and you'll move to something else, or you'll realise that doesn't work and you'll come back to where you were.
Yeah. I mean, either way, we're moving forwards.
100%.
With our health. So whether it works or it doesn't, it's just, you know, it's a fork in the road, and they all lead up and end up in the same direction, you know, at the end of the day, the same destination as well. Let's talk a little bit about fiber then, because you kind of touched on that. Now, of course, you're not really eating any fiber. You're not eating any fruit, no vegetables, just the kind of quote unquote meat fiber, the connective tissue in the meat.
Yes.
How is that affecting you, not having any fiber?
I'm having less bowel movements, but I'm not uncomfortable. And I just, again, coming back to listening to your body, my body says, you need to go, you go. And then I feel okay. I certainly don't feel like it's affecting me in any way. And again, it's early days, and that may change down the track. But I feel, again, that I'm in tune with my body now, that I'll know if something's wrong. Whereas before, I didn't know when something was wrong, because my gut brain link was all messed up, and I was just responding to cravings, and I didn't know which way I was up. So I'm pretty confident that if I'm lacking something moving forward, then my body will sort of send me a message.
I think it probably will. And, you know, certain foods might start to become more attractive to you. The idea of, you know, dare I say it, fruit or something, you might go into the shop and think, oh, shock horror. You know, oh, that looks really good, you know, today. Or maybe it doesn't, you know, and that's perfectly fine. Well, again, whatever works for you. You said early days, but you've been on this now almost 6 months.
It was October, so 5 months. So I'm due to get blood tests on my birthday, which will be the 6-month mark, which is early April. So I'm feeling really good about it. The numbers may not be quite there yet, but the symptoms have just all disappeared. So I know that I'm heading in the right direction. But talking about different things being right for different people, my wife is an endurance athlete. She does Ironman triathlons, which she's obviously not right in the head. So that's a 4K swim, 180K bike, and a full marathon at the end. She had a back injury and put on a little bit of weight, and she was not happy with how she looked or how she felt. And she saw the success I had on carnivore, and she said, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can eat just meat. And she's pretty aware of her body signaling. So she said, I'd like to try keto. and she's been going for probably 2 months now, and she hasn't even got on the scales, but the clothes are fitting better, and she's dropped a couple of sizes easily. I think she's probably back to a fighting weight, but she feels great. Um, her outlook is great. She's got more energy. She's less just aches and pains. So that's, I cook a carnivore dinner for myself, and I cook a keto dinner or a lunch for her, and it just works brilliantly.
Hmm. And you don't find that's an issue in the house at all? Because people worry about this. I don't really know why. That people worry their partners are going to sabotage them. They're going to not understand. They're going to complain. I mean, you don't find that's an issue at all?
Not at all. Early on, she had her doubts, and look, I did too before I started doing research, because everything we'd been told is that don't eat fat because it makes you fat, and red meat gives you cancer, and this and this and that. And so she had concerns to start with, but to her credit, she sat down with me and she had an open mind, and she watched these videos, and her eyes were opened at the same time as mine. And she, from that point on, when the science behind it was clear, she's been nothing but supportive, and it's been great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much the reaction that my wife had. I came home, I spoke about this before, from low carb down under 2022, and heard Dr. Chafee talk, Plants Are Trying to Kill You. And,
Yes.
which is a great talk. And I mean, it's titled like that. You can't not go to that talk. Your title like that. Come on.
It's on the
And
bucket list for sure.
I mean, I'd heard of the carnivore diet prior to that, but just from one patient who was doing it, he got great success. But I, just my typical doctor thing, I couldn't kind of take that on at that point in time. And I came back and said to my wife, look, what about this crazy thing? And she was like, well, you're really unhealthy anyway. Like you've done everything else. Like you like eating meat. You're really bad with sugar. Why don't you just give it a go? You've done keto and stuff. Like, you can do fasting. It's just see what happens. And then she saw the changes like straight away and was just like, wow, you're literally just like a new man. It was just,
and that's the thing. It's
incredible.
the thing that I've found is that there's people who poo-poo low carb, and they get dogmatic about this or that. But even though most of the evidence is anecdotal, it's just people's stories, it's a complete tidal wave. It's too big to ignore. All the people who've just had these remarkable stories of curing anxiety and depression and PCOS, and there's studies out now talking about cancer cells can't they live on sugar, they can't live on ketones, and that's really encouraging stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, anecdotes are, they're very low level evidence. They're probably the lowest in the pile of evidence in terms of that hierarchy of evidence. But like you said, it's a tidal wave of anecdotes. And at some point, you've got to stand up and listen and say, hey, look, there's something here. And I think a lot of doctors, and I've been criticized, kind of publicly on Twitter and things at times, saying that why don't you try, dietary interventions for things like ADHD, for example. Yeah. I recall a conversation a long time ago now on Twitter, and people saying, oh, as a GP, there's nothing we can do for ADHD. Kids are going to be left to languish, and just wait for a specialist to become available. And I said, look, there are things you can do. You can try dietary interventions. And then, being lambasted, you're a terrible GP because there's no evidence behind all this, you're making stuff up and all this kind of nonsense. And it's like, I just kind of extricated myself from the conversation and said, okay, well, you guys, you go and fail your patients. And that's probably a bit harsh.
Yeah. It's absolutely criminal, in my opinion, that doctors are medicating 6-year-old kids.
Yeah, I mean, the medications they have a role. They have a role, but that shouldn't necessarily be our default. But the point there is, there are things that you can maybe try. I mean, what's the harm that comes from saying, okay, maybe just try reducing the sugar in your diet? Like, we know ketogenic diets are safe. Daughter.
Yeah, she'd have sugar if she'd go to a birthday party or something. She'd have some sugar, and she wasn't naughty, but she'd be hard to settle down, hard to communicate with. We took her off sugar, different kid.
Yeah, I mean, our middle daughter, Charlotte, I've said it repeatedly on the show before, she has, some sort of autistic trait. She probably doesn't actually have autism diagnosable, but she definitely has some autistic traits. And she does worse when she eats loads of sugar. We know this.
Yeah.
And she probably has some mild ADHD as well. It wouldn't surprise me, although we've kind of tested her ourselves and think she doesn't really pass any tests, but there's definitely going to be something there. Raw milk seems to help her a lot as well, which is interesting. And again, that's an anecdote,
Okay.
but it's our anecdote and it works. There's absolutely no
Yes.
doubt that it works for our child. But again, this is repeated across YouTube, across Facebook, across the world, that these things can help. And as you said, it's a tidal wave. And at some point, scientists, doctors need to stand up and say, that's a thing.
They really do.
That's the thing
and
that's
the thing
happening.
about the internet or social media. Yes, if people don't like something, they won't be shy about coming forward and saying this is no good. But you read any carnivore forum or keto forum, and it's 100 ticks to every cross, and it comes a time when, as you say, that they'll just have to start paying attention to it. It's too big to ignore.
They will at some point. And people, again, scientists, they forget, doctors forget. People like, Isaac Newton and the apple, that was an anecdote.
Yes.
But the anecdote turned into then research. And it turned into then gravity.
We have gravity.
And it's like, oh, wow, okay, that came from an anecdote. And then things like penicillin and H. pylori, someone drank, I can't remember the name now, drank the H. pylori drink and got a stomach ulcer. That was an anecdote, but it then spawned this research. Yeah. It's just now we have all these vested interests that are working against that and saying, no, you can't do that because you can't go off sugar. The food companies start to lose money. The drug companies start to lose money.
Yes, they do.
And they're the ones that pay for this research.
Yeah, that probably leads me on to my next point. So as a professional, I'm a drug and alcohol tester in the local coal mines. I'm in the Hunter Valley, New South Wales. And the amount of people who are just on medications that probably aren't necessary, or at the very least, they haven't even been spoken to about diet. I make the joke that if you go to a doctor for a broken leg, he'll put you on statins. And it's quite scary, the amount of people who are on antidepressants and there's no plan to try anything else. So what this has done for me, this whole change in my life, it's made me want to take a new tack. So I'm actually going to look at getting qualifications to be a health and nutrition coach, because I want to work with these guys who live where I live and they're around my age, and they're just following the advice that they've always followed. If you've got a problem, go to your doctor, he gives you a pill, that's that. So, you're diagnosed with diabetes, he'll just give you metformin and you can continue drinking a litre of chocolate milk every morning and everything's fine. So I want to become an advocate for those guys and refer them to specialists who'll give them the right advice. A GP who may be familiar with low carb. So spoiler alert, I may have some things to talk to you about after the podcast. But that's the goal going forward. So I've had some early talks with a couple of people who are very well known in the low carb space. And I want to approach it from a multi-pronged aspect. So the medicinal, the GP side of thing, I want to talk to them about mental health and carb addiction and emotional eating and all these sort of things that help them understand why they do things, and it will hopefully sort of prompt them to make the changes they need before they get to my stage where they go to the doctor and they're setting the Guinness Book of Records for A1C.
Yeah, I mean, that, again, not a typo, you said repeatedly. So 16.8 is very, very high. Certainly the record in my books, I've not seen one that high. So, but I think that's an incredibly powerful thing for you to be thinking about doing. And I guess it just shows you the profound effect that this has had, whether it's carnivore or not, you end up staying with long term. What you've obviously seen is that diet actually really does underpin health. And then you want to spread that message.
I couldn't believe that I can wake up and feel this good, because I just never have. I'm not exaggerating when I say I feel like I'm 25. And so I really appreciate that I found the right advice to help me make that change, because if I kept going the way I was going, I probably wouldn't make 53, certainly not 54. So I want to be an advocate for guys to sort of hold their hand and say, look, I've done this, you can do it too. Let's go and talk to people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah. And I think that is genuinely the most powerful thing that we have, and my patients, I know, appreciate me, using my stories. You know, it's not like I spend hours talking about myself all day. I mean, I probably do, but I try not to. But, you know, I use myself as an example because I think it helps to humanize the doctor, a healthcare professional.
Yes.
And I think it really helps to show, okay, well, yeah, I've been there, I've done that. I know what you're going through. And maybe not type 2 diabetes, for example. And you can't say that for everything. I haven't had cancer and these kinds of things. No. But, you know, things like obesity, insulin resistance, sugar addiction, you know, these kinds of problems. And I think there's really nothing as powerful as someone like yourself then coming onto the scene and saying, look, I did it. Like I was you like this time before, and I fixed this in 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It can be fixed, you know, and you just need to believe in yourself.
Yeah. And hopefully I can get the message across because I was exactly where they are. So I can, when they say, they talk to me about their thought patterns, it's probably exactly where I was. So some people you may need to get in a headlock. Some people it's more gently, gently, and we can just sort of walk them through the process and say, "Hey, look, don't turn your life upside down. Go off bread for a week. See how you feel. Cut out sugar for a week. Even if you drink Diet Coke for a week, see how you feel." And they go, "Oh, my face is thinned out, and I'm not going to the toilet as much." Right. Well, let's take the next step, and away we go.
It really
Mm-hmm.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know Barry talks about like, 90 days. You know, I talk about 30 days in my carnivore, challenge. Chafee talks about 30 days as well. Even in a week, I saw benefits in 2 days
Yeah.
on the carnivore diet, and probably less than that, to be fair. Like the next morning, I probably woke up just feeling great, but 2 days definitely for sure. Where do you go from here now then? You're pending your blood tests. You've got another maybe 6 weeks or so for those. Where do you see yourself moving? Do you see yourself staying on the carnivore diet long term? Do you see yourself changing? What do you think the future might hold for you?
I don't want to tie myself to anything. It seems to be working for me, and I can't report any problems. So certainly for the short term, I see myself staying where I am. But your last podcast really opened my eyes to be getting more constant blood tests and just monitoring more often and not sort of sitting on your laurels. So I want to leave myself open to the possibility that I may have to change things going forward. But with the changes that I've made from where I was 6 months ago, a small tweak from here, it's not scary. I don't have the lingering doubt that it's unsustainable. I actually look forward to it with confidence and say, right, well, if I now do this, I'm going to feel even better.
And that's what I'm, talking about with my change in the Primal Fusion diet. It is really just like a small tweak from carnivore, adding that tiny little bit of sugar back in. I know sugar's an evil word, but we don't have to fear it. And it's just adding that tiny little bit back into the diet. I'm just moving my camera here, and then actually maybe getting some of those. There are potential benefits of it. Just again, in very, very, very small amounts.
No, you've just got to leave your mind open to things and always be looking to improve. I've improved 100%, so now it's increments of 5%, and maybe down the track it'll be increments of 1%. But that shouldn't be something to be feared. That should be something to be explored and really sort of go after.
Absolutely. Did anybody talk to you about diet in your journey?
No, not at all. It was, no, I went to the doctor or the last time I went 20 years ago, it was lose weight. My blood pressure was a bit high, so it's cut down your salt. And I pump Celtic salt now like it's going out of fashion. But no, it was the food pyramid. It's what you hear on TV. It's fat makes you fat. The old balanced diet, which sort of makes sense because balance it's a touchy feely good word. What's wrong? What's bad about balance? So when people talk about balanced diet, it's pretty easy to believe. And then you've got the fast food companies or even the bread companies, the General Mills, these guys talking about all the nutrients in bread and how flour and pasta give you energy. And I love how on food packaging that energy is another word for sugar.
Yeah. Oh, they come up with all sorts of names for sugar.
Yeah.
all sorts
Over
of
100,
names
I
for
think, at
things.
last count.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking. I mean, I think the food standards really are pretty terrible. The nutritional guidelines are pretty shocking. I mean, just nutritional guidelines and sugar. Again, my new book that I'm writing now, I shared an excerpt from that on my Facebook, and it was actually pretty shocking when I was kind of making these calculations. I thought I have to kind of share this. If we think about the nutritional guidelines here in Australia, and America is basically the same, 45 to 65% of calories are recommended to come from carbohydrates. Now, calories
Yes.
are a made-up terminology. They're not really related to food and so on, but we'll use them for now anyway.
Yes, they're a measure of heat.
Exactly. Average male, is going to be somewhere between, say, 2.5 to 3,000 calories. If we go on about, I know the numbers. So if we go on 2,400 calories, because I know the numbers for this, and obviously higher will be higher, 65%, which is what the upper recommendation is for carbohydrates, is 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate, comes out at roughly 450 grams of sugar.
It's crazy.
Is what we are told in America, in Australia, rest of the world is pretty similar, if not the same. We are told 450 grams of sugar, literally one of those half-kilo bags you see in the supermarket,
Yep.
that we should eat that every day, that is healthy to eat that. Because carbohydrates are basically just sugar. They come in different forms, yes. And not all sugars maybe are equal and so on, but that's essentially what it's boiling down to. Half a kilo of sugar. And 2,400 calories, I eat more than that. Like that's a relatively low number. You probably eat 2,500, 3,000, 3,500 maybe.
Easily. Yeah.
My wife probably eats 2,500 and she's, 2/3 the size of me. And, so most people are going to eat more than that. And then you're up with like 600-700 grams, maybe. That's the recommendation.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable.
It's insane. I'm a bit of a math nerd, and I actually sat down and did the numbers. So I was a sort of 2 litre of Coke a day, and a can of Coke, I think from memory, has got 39 grams of sugar in it. And so factoring in all the carbs and all the other garbage that I used to eat, I was going pretty close to eating my body weight in sugar every year. Around 100 kilos, 120 kilos a year of sugar. Absolutely frightening.
Really scary, isn't it? It's very, very scary.
It's insane.
But even if we take that recommendation, roughly 500 grams of sugar a day, what's that? 180 kilograms in a year.
Yeah.
Most people are probably going to eat more than that.
Yes. Yes, I would think so.
Like that's pretty shocking. And that's the recommendation. That's not, this is okay to eat. This is healthy.
No.
It's
That's what
good
you should be doing.
to eat this much sugar. I mean, I say this to my patients now, go into the supermarket, don't buy it, but just have a look at that half-kilo bag of white sugar and just think, if I eat that today, am I going to feel healthy? Am I going to be healthy?
Yeah.
Don't buy it and eat it because you won't be healthy.
Please don't do that.
You will end up in a diabetic coma. Like,
I saw a great talk from Zoe Harcum, and she talked about the reason we get fat and sick at the same time. And she used just very round figures of an average female. You need about 1,500 calories just to function, for your respiration to work and your cells to repair and do all that sort of stuff. And about another 500 calories to drive your car, get the mail, just do all the standard stuff. Now, she talked about the brain can only use protein and fat for certain tasks, and cell repair can only use protein and fat. So if you're 60% of your 2,000 calories are carbs, not only do you not have enough nutrients for your cells and your brain to do what it needs to do, but you store all the excess because they can't be used for what you want them to be used for. So not only are you undernourishing yourself, but you're putting on weight at exactly the same time.
absolutely. Well, this is the thing, calories in, calories out. Again, coming back to that, it just doesn't work because a calorie is not a calorie. It matters where it actually comes from. And I think, as far as weight loss, and I know we're talking about diabetes today, but I just finished reading Ben Bickman's Why We Get Sick, which is an excellent book. And he talks about this, insulin plus the energy, so for fat cells to grow, they need the signal, which is the insulin. and then they also need the energy. And if you just cut one, it's just not really actually sufficient, because it's still going to get the energy. As you said, you can't
Yes.
really go low enough on the carbs unless you go to, very low carbohydrate, purposefully going low. You're
Yes.
never really going to go low enough to actually not go below that number. Most likely you're still going to be feeding it energy, and it's still got the signal to
Yes.
drive.
Correct. 100%.
That's it.
100%.
Yeah. So moving forwards, you're planning on, kind of trying to take this forward, learn health, nutrition coaching, teaching
Yep.
others. You're planning on staying carnivore for the foreseeable future because it's working
Yep.
for you, which is fantastic. I'm very happy for you, of course. But you're remaining open to, just playing with it a little bit and ultimately finding what works for you.
Yeah. There's still plenty that I don't know. I'm still researching like an absolute lunatic. So if I learn something that I think could help, then I'll jump on board. No doubt about it.
Yeah. How can people find you, like social media and so on? Are you chronicling this kind of journey anywhere?
I'm going to start. My Twitter handle is at pseudo echo, just like the band. On Instagram, I've just gone on Instagram at my children's beckoning under Real Troy Martin. But watch this space. You'll see a page very soon called Function Health. So that's when we'll get into hopefully the coaching part of it. And look, if I can make a living out of it, fantastic. If I can't, just the fact that I can pay it forward and hopefully help some people, um, you know, have the same sort of success and happiness that I've had, then that's a win.
Yeah, and I think that's incredible. I'll make sure to put those links in the episode description, and yeah, everyone make sure you go follow Troy on social media there. Was there anything that you wanted to ask me? I'm conscious we've been talking for about 50 minutes now, and is there anything that you wanted to ask me? I always give my guests the opportunity to ask me any questions as well.
No, the main thing that I wanted to, I guess, talk to you about, we've sort of covered, was the resistance to being dogmatic and just leave yourself open to things and what caused you to change your mind. And I think that's something that everyone should take out of this is that if you're a sugar addict like we were, your body won't necessarily be talking to you, or you certainly won't recognize the signals. Once you get started on this way of eating, you'll be amazed that your body will talk to you. It's nothing to be scared of. Your body will just give you gentle nudges and say, "Hey, this isn't quite working." Approach it from a positive standpoint and say, "Right, I want to feel even better than I do now," and just be open to try anything, because there's certainly, when you get to the stage that we're at, where you, I guess, hopefully 90% optimal, then there's certainly nothing that you could try other than eating the half-kilo bag of sugar, like you suggested, that's going to hurt anyone. So approach it with an open mind, and I think you'll be just on a constant forward track of just feeling better and better all the time, and that's what we're all after eventually.
Perfect. Well, look, thank you very much for coming on the show tonight, Troy. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully you can drop me a line when you get those results, and I can update the episode description, and of course get you back on the show maybe in a couple of months, and yeah, just see how things are going and let everyone know what's happening with your journey. Of course, people can follow you on social media, and keeping an eye out for the site Function Health.
Yep. And I better give a quick plug to the Meat Appreciation Society, which is a Facebook group that you've opened up. It's exactly what we're talking about. It's not dogmatic. It's completely dedicated to people just looking to improve their health and exchanging ideas. It's a really positive space. So that's, if you're looking to start this way of eating, if you're looking to do something positive about your health, you could do far worse than starting off having a look at that Facebook page.
I appreciate that. We've actually just changed the name to Meat Based Tribe now, but the link's still. I asked the group, and they decided it was maybe a better name. So, but no, I appreciate you doing a shout out. Someone commented the other day that I'm really bad at self promotion. I don't know. I don't really, as much as I talk about myself, I don't really like talking about myself that much. I don't like kind of hogging the limelight or anything. And I do this for just selfless reasons. I just want to share the message, just like you. And so I'm not looking to monetize you in groups or anything like that. Really, it's just getting the word out there. But yes, the Meat Based Tribe, my Facebook group, link in the episode description, of course, is just free for anyone to join that just wants to eat more meat, is appreciative of meat and the health benefits it can bring. And anywhere from, strict carnivore to basically a vegan who wants to dabble in meat is more than welcome, in that group. And I moderate
just
it.
Come and ask questions.
I moderate it, so there's no issues. And just come and ask questions, and just hang out. And it's a pretty active group. It's pretty active.
It is. It's great.
Yeah, it really is. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight, Troy. I'll let you get back to your wife and your dogs. You said your dogs have been very well behaved, as have my kids. So.
They have. They've been very good. I'll give them a ribeye for being so good.
Oh, that's very generous of you. My kids don't get ribeyes, but they do get. We made our own homemade beef jerky the other day. It was very nice. The kids have been all over it.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, very nice. Very easy. We just slice top side, bit of herbs and salt and pepper and things on there as you want, and then just dehydrate it in the air fryer. So easy.
Away you go.
My God, so easy. Anyway, I'll let you go. Thank you for coming on the show, Troy. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Thanks for having me. Great to catch up.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Meat Medic podcast. We'll see you in the next episode.